Up? What is up? What is up? Hope everyone is doing okay. Political geography, geopolitics. Sometimes you hear it called that. What we're going to be doing is we're looking in the Unit 4 of APHUG geography starting today, focusing a little bit on how countries get along with one another across space on Earth. So we're going to be talking about that, looking at the very basics of the study of political geography, and that is really starting with what is a state. So that's what I hope to answer today in this particular lecture. We're also going to spend some time looking at other definitions, like the difference between a state and a nation, the difference between, is there a difference between a country and a state? What is a nation state? What is a multinational state? And we're going to spend most of our time looking at this little thing called sovereignty, one of the most important parts of the study of geopolitics. So without any further ado, let's get started. I'm going to do something I didn't do last time. I'm going to focus the screen so y'all can actually see the slides. Here we go. Bam. First things first, I meant to show y'all this several weeks ago. I haven't done it. I am on social media. Of these social media that you can find me on, the one that I'm most active on is YouTube. I'll be honest, I don't put stuff up super duper awesome, but I do have some things up there that I think would be pretty helpful for you guys, including some unit reviews, including some videos on population and maps and things like this that I think might serve you well in terms of review. Now, there's a lot of older stuff. Might not as much. You'll be able to see what's not based on what you might need. So it's not like a end all be all. One day, maybe, hopefully it will be, but it's there if you need it. Also on Twitter, Dustin K. Fowler. I'm not ridiculously active on Twitter, but every now and again I'll jump on there. So if you guys need something on there, feel free. I do have a Facebook page that I would probably use a little bit more if you guys would interact with it. So feel free to interact there, and if it works out, great. If not, then at least we tried. So the main thing, though, here again is on YouTube, you can find some videos that can really help you prepare for your midterms. Another thing that I want to tell you, more pertaining to Unit 4 with political geography in APHUG geography, is that this right here is just there are other YouTube channels. I am quite a YouTube junkie. There's other YouTube channels out there that I think are really, really good for understanding political geography. But one thing that you can do if you want ongoing education on the world around you, Unit 4 political geography, that's the stuff you're really going to be seeing in the news predominantly. Now there's other facets. Every facet of human geography is in the news, right? You're going to see population and migration. You're going to see culture. PBS NewsHour does a really good job of bringing you balanced news and also of integrating other facets of the course into its segments in the middle of the show. It is about 50 to 55 minutes long, happens every single night between 6 and 7, like any other news. It is completely free if you have the internet. You go on YouTube and search for PBS NewsHour. If today is the 13th, then tomorrow morning I'll watch the news. I'll look up 1213, and it will bring up the news. Really cool source for you if you're interested in learning more about the world around you, both the political geography as well as the other units of geography and the implications that they come with. So feel free to take a look at that. It's my number one go-to news source, since I honestly don't even have TV service, like a paid TV cable subscription or anything anyway. So I just watch YouTube. Here's our objectives today. We're looking at geopolitics. What is that? We're going to spend most of our time studying the concept of what is a state. Borders, people, government, those kind of play into the characteristics that all states are going to have. We're going to look at sovereignty and spend a huge amount of time on that, and then finish up with some terms and names like nations and nation states. So what is a state? Well, what are we looking at here? Are we looking at states? Pick out a state. I'm from South Carolina. Is that state? I didn't mean to do that. Is Texas? They sometimes might think of themselves as a country unto themselves. I saw a map the other day on fan maps on Instagram. If you guys have Instagram, follow fan maps. It's pretty legit. But they said that Texas is the number one state on this map. Texas is the number one state that we would like to see pushed out of the union. Got a picture of North and South Korea states. What's going on here? Are we looking at states? Here are some micro states. These are called micro states. We're looking at the continent of Europe. You've got little countries or little states called Andorra, Monaco, Liechtenstein, San Marino, Vatican City. We might have heard of Vatican City, right? Are these states? Wait, are these states in the same way that these are states? All right, so what in the world is a microstate? How does that play into what our definition is? Here's South Carolina. Your whole life is a lie. What do I mean by that? Let me tell you. That right there, by the definition that we're looking at in AP Human Geography for geopolitics, is not a state. I said it. It's not a state. Here's the definition that you guys need to know for a state. And actually, this is what you'll come up with if you Google it. Okay, it says this, and I wouldn't write this down exactly. I'll give you a better definition in a minute. But a nation or territory considered as an organized political community under one government. All right, what exactly is that saying? Okay, there are three characteristics of a state. Here they are. The first is you have to have defined territory within defined borders, okay, that no one can dispute. Defined territory. Number two, you have to have people living in that territory. And number three, you have to have sovereignty. In other words, the ability to determine or govern what happens in that territory without outside influence. In other words, one government with the power to enact law and the power to govern the land. So this word nation, I would not think of a nation, for the sake of what we're going to talk about today, as a synonym with a state. Now, we're going to get to nation towards the end of this presentation, but know that even though these two words are used interchangeably, we're going to define them differently in human geography. Okay, we're going to know them by different things. Here are the characteristics. I just now said it. Number one, you have to have territory. Territory is defined by a set boundary. France. Does France have territory? Yes, of course it does. It even has boundaries you can clearly see on this particular map. If I put it on a political map of Europe and showed you France next to all the other countries in Europe, you would also see that, in fact, has political boundaries. That is undisputed. Everybody knows it. It is a, to pull a Unit 1 term, it is a formal region. No one's going to dispute what France is. Is Lexington a state? Lexington is a county within South Carolina. It has territory, it has boundaries. But we don't think of that as a state because it's a county. And I just said that even South Carolina is not a state by our AP Human Geography definition of what that is. So what is it that South Carolina and Lexington lacks? Well, they have people, don't they? So Lexington County and South Carolina as a whole, and any other state in the United States, such as Texas or Georgia or California, they all have territory and people. We aren't going to dispute that. But what they don't have is the power to rule. They don't have complete sovereignty. Now, wait a minute. I understand that we live in a federal system. All right. Maybe we'll talk more about this later on in another lecture, but a federal system, basically states share their power with the federal government. But ultimately, what is stated at the federal level is the law of the land. Okay, a state has no ability to go beyond that authority. So this is the reason why you can't see South Carolina engage in a diplomatic, any kind of political diplomacy with another sovereign state like China or France or whatever it might be. All right. So the United States as a whole, the federal government of the United States has to do business with other countries. That's why, if I look way back here, what are we looking at? Well, these aren't individual, these aren't states, or as in these don't have territory, people, and sovereignty, but the United States of America as a whole they have all three of those, don't they? We know the set territory and boundaries of the U.S. We know that there are people living in there, and they also fall under the sovereignty of the United States government. So what I'm saying here is that when we look at the definition, there it is right there, stupid me. When we look at the definition of a state in AP Human Geography, we are looking at a synonym with what we know as a country. There we have it. The state, as in the United States, is kind of like a province or a part of a country that may exist, but it doesn't have sovereignty. That's the point that I'm trying to make. So a state is really another way of saying a country. States in the U.S. do not have sovereignty. They depend on, or sovereignty is had only by the United States government as a whole. And what is sovereignty, by the way? Supreme power or authority. The second definition here is the authority of a state to govern itself or another state. Now, this, again, the key here is that when you're looking at sovereignty at the state level, you can't have a sovereign state that is controlled by another state. That doesn't really fit the mold. All right. So in order for you to be a sovereign state, no one else on earth can have power over what takes place within your territory. And that's important because when you really think about what I just said, do we really have the power? Does anyone really have the power to do whatever they want within their borders? We'll talk about it. Sovereignty is complicated. Today, the practice of sovereignty may be different from the concept itself. All right. What in the world does that mean? Well, if you look at historical sovereignty, this right here, you're looking at a map of the Roman Empire at its greatest extent. The greatest extent of, I guess, when the Roman Empire was really probably the most powerful it was going to be. It was around the time of Augustus. He is said to have been the greatest of all the emperors, and Rome was just kind of thriving kind of during and right after his reign. So what you're looking at here is borders that are most of the Mediterranean, part of the Middle East over here, part of Southwest Asia, part of Northern Africa. Why does the border end where it ends? Why didn't the border go? Why didn't they take all the British Isles? Why just this area in the southern part of the island of Great Britain? Why didn't they take the whole thing? It's because they couldn't. They couldn't take it. They didn't have sovereignty. What do I mean? What I mean is the people here that rebelled against them, that fought against them, the natives, they fought so vigilantly that the Romans literally couldn't advance. They couldn't beat them. And so they built a wall, Hadrian's Wall, in order to demarcate the Roman Empire from what was not the Roman Empire over here. Same over this here. This here is a term we're going to use to describe a frontier zone. Okay, so wait, I'm getting a little bit ahead of myself because a frontier is a term that you need to know for AP Human Geography for the political geography unit. It's covered in the Rubenstein book for short. And I would take the time to go ahead and write it down. But what it is it's an area where it's you think about frontiers as unexplored regions. Well, really what they are is areas where no one really has power. So there's not a whole lot of governance in your frontier regions. The Romans couldn't control it, and the Germanic tribes that lived up in this part of Europe didn't really have control either. They kind of used it as somewhat of a buffer. Okay, when you started to go into the frontier area, you had to know one thing: the Roman government was not going to be able to protect you very well. All right, and so this is as far as the Romans went. Their sovereignty, y'all, was measured by their capacity to defend it. Okay, so they had to literally be able to hold their territory with military might in order to have sovereignty. And the reason why these other little areas within the empire didn't have sovereignty is because they couldn't stand up to the Romans when the Romans came in and conquered them. All right, so I'll move on to look at a more contemporary example of questionable sovereignty. What you're looking at here is Ukraine. Here's Ukraine. You've got your western, eastern section, and then the Crimean Peninsula. All right. In 2014, you know what the Russians did? They came in and just took Crimea. They took it. They annexed it. There's a $20 word for you. Annex. Oh, goodness gracious. The transcript is not going to pick that up. ANNEX. All right. What that means is they just decide, hey, we're going to take this land and make it ours. And there's nothing you can do about it. So here's the thing, is that really the people living in Crimea, they're predominantly ethnic Russians anyway. A lot of them wanted to be part of Russia. But this territory, remember the characteristics of a state, the territory belonged to Ukraine. Did Ukraine have sovereignty in this situation? If the Russians are going to come in and just take that territory and say, hey, it's ours now, did Ukraine have sovereignty over their territory? You see where I'm going with this? How can you have sovereignty if another country has the ability to come in and do as they please? And by the way, we really couldn't do anything about it. Yeah, we imposed different types of sanctions and penalties on rich people in Russia and things like this in order to try to punish them for that. And the international community condemned the mess out of it and said nobody recognizes it. But the fact of the matter is, the Russians control Ukraine. Sovereignty today is usually based on, I just said it, recognition. So even tiny microstates can be sovereign, but recognition is also kind of debatable. What does it mean to be recognized, and how do we determine who will or who won't be recognized internationally by the United Nations? I just showed you this already. These are called microstates. Now, literally what we mean by this is that these are states in the same way that the United States is a state, in the same way that France is a state, in the same way that Canada is a state, but they're super tiny, hence the word micro, all right? So you guys might have looked at maps of Europe all your life and never heard of Andorra, or never heard of Monaco, or never heard of Liechtenstein. These here are, some of these are like city-states. They're basically the city and an area kind of surrounding it. They're very small in terms of area and population. You can see the area and population listed here on the map. Vatican City is one of the smallest, is literally an enclave. That's another word you need to know. An enclave is like a country kind of surrounded by another country, okay? It is surrounded completely by what is politically Italy, but it's governed by the Pope. The Pope even has his own personal army soldiers called the Swiss Guard. They look kind of cool. You should go and Google them. I should have put a picture in my presentation. After the presentation, go in there and Google them. You get a kick out of it. Here are some other microstates. Some of these might not actually be considered like a true sovereign state. I'm not really sure. Maybe they are. You can definitely see the ones we have in here in Europe, which is pretty consistent. You've got others in other parts of the world as well. So Singapore is one you definitely need to know. Straight up city state. It's also kind of an industrial city within Southeast Asia. No, I'm not gonna go there. But yeah, so I would definitely know Singapore. I would definitely know the European examples, the Vatican City, and maybe a few of these others as well. Just a simple map that shows the extent of microstates. So to look back a little bit, I'll go back to look a little bit more at sovereignty and recognition. Recognition is when other countries are going to say, hey, we accept that this is a sovereign state. Okay. So in other words, in order for Andorra to actually be something that is considered legitimate in the international world, other countries have to say, we recognize your existence as a sovereign state. Therefore, we're going to do business with you. We will do trade with you. We will do politics with you. All right. You may have heard. I don't think I've got this in here actually. I probably should. You may have heard recently, like within the last year or so, the Catalan people over in this section of Spain. I think well, you can't really see it here either, but kind of on the far eastern end of Spain. The people of Catalonia, that's a area within Spain, and they're kind of their own nationality, if you will. We're going to get to that in a little bit. But they don't identify really with the majority of Spain. They speak a different dialect of Spanish. They recently held a bid or a referendum that the Spanish considered to be illegal, where they elected themselves into independence. All right, I don't know if you heard about this in the news, but it was, like I said, about a year ago or so. And immediately, the Spanish are like, well, you guys are committing treason. This is not okay. You can't just vote yourself out of being part of our country. And the people of Catalonia appealed to the world for support and for recognition, and no one gave it to them. We didn't support them or give it to them or say, hey, it's okay that you guys did this. We're not going to, nobody recognized them as their own nation. Now, this is one important thing about sovereignty that is, again, a little bit sometimes unclear. Nobody in the world usually is going to support a part of a country saying, hey, we don't want to be part of Spain, or we don't want to be part of Serbia. You remember last week we talked about Kosovo. You can't usually just hold a vote to become your own country, because if someone did it in Spain, what would stop Texas from holding a vote to become their own state and separate from the United States? Right? And we don't want other countries coming in and saying, oh, we're going to recognize Texas as a sovereign nation, because then that's them spitting in our face, because Texas is part of our what? Defined territory. You see where I'm going with this? So the people of Catalonia had no success at seceding from Spain because no one recognized them. And that's important. So you can't just decide, hey, I'm a country, we don't want to be part of Spain anymore. That didn't work out well for them. On the flip side, there are some countries that did recognize Kosovo as a sovereign nation, but they're not recognized by the United Nations, and therefore the majority of the international community does not accept Kosovo as a sovereign nation, and they never will, because Russia is part of the 5 permanent members of the Security Council, just like China is part of the 5 permanent members of the UN Security Council, and would never recognize the sovereignty of Taiwan. All right, so and we are going to be looking at supranationalism in January. So I'm not going to spend too much time talking about the Security Council right now. Just know that that's a big part of this. But what is Taiwan exactly? Here's the situation. Looking at a unit 1 word, site and situation. The situation is the relative location of Taiwan is situated right here compared to or in relation to China. Taiwan actually is, they consider themselves to be China, right? Yes. In fact, they call themselves, the political title of this country is the Republic of China. Wow. Sometimes you'll see it written ROC, Republic of China. Okay. So how can these guys claim to be China? They're not, right? Check it out. Taiwan is an island on which, for all practical purposes, has been independent since 1950. All right. But here's the deal, y'all, is that the Chinese fought a civil war that ended in 1949, and the losers went to Taiwan. Now, here's the thing. The winners were the communists. We didn't want the communists in power in the United States. So initially, we didn't support the Communist People's Republic of China. So we accepted Taiwan as, the Republic of China, as the real China. But here's the thing: is that as time went on, tensions kind of reduced a little bit. The Cold War began to kind of wind down some. We needed to do trade, and China had a burgeoning manufacturing economy, and so we started to kind of say, hey, it would really benefit us to be able to be on good ties with the People's Republic. And so in order to do that, we had to recognize China, the People's Republic of China, all right? This China, we had to recognize them as the sovereign China and not recognize outright Taiwan as a direct state. This is part of what we're going to call, I think I've got in here, it's the one China, 2 systems policy. Okay, we kind of apply a very similar mindset also with Hong Kong, but Taiwan is, in all practical purposes, treated like an independent nation. But China has never forgotten that, and they openly consider Taiwan to be part of their territory. So the Taiwanese are like, hey, we're not Chinese, and the people in China, as a matter of fact, are like, yeah, you are. You're part of our territory, and so it gets kind of crazy when you think about it. I have a question. Let me read it. What about Washington, D.C.? I only just saw this question. What was the context of that question? Can you be more specific, maybe in the comments, Aman? I'm not sure exactly. Oh, I think maybe you're talking about, is Washington, D.C. a microstate? And if that's what you're talking about, it's not in the city state. No, because it's not a sovereign nation. That right there would be what would have to happen if Washington, D.C. was. Great. Sorry about the delay there. I didn't see the question until just now. I was in it. I was in it. The Trump, I'm probably going to mispronounce this, side call. All right. So when President Trump was president-elect, that means that he had just been elected into office, but he wasn't actually the president yet. He was about to replace Obama in January at his inauguration. He took a call from the Taiwan president, right? Who is this lady, Tsai Ing-wen. I know I'm mispronouncing the mess out of that. But here's the thing: is that by him taking her call, and they talked for like 10 minutes, they congratulated each other on their political wins. This right here is Trump essentially going through the motions of having recognized Taiwan as a nation that they can call their leaders and have a discussion with. It's almost like a form of recognition of Taiwan as a sovereign state. No president had talked with the president or leader of Taiwan directly since 1979, which is when the U.S. started to accept the People's Republic of China as the predominant China. In order to, like I said, in order to do business with the People's Republic, they had to acknowledge that Taiwan was part of China as that one China, two systems kind of deal. All right, this one here is, it just happened, y'all. And the U.S. and China, we're kind of at odds, both politically and economically right now. If you follow the news, we're not really on friendly terms. People always people are always so dramatic, like, we're probably on the worst terms you've ever been on with Russia and with China. But I mean, truly, we're not really on great terms with them. And this here was kind of a slap in the face. Another thing that you want to know about this is that and President Trump did kind of reiterate on a video with, I believe it was Fox News. I mean, it's gotta be, where he talked a little bit about how he doesn't feel like he should be controlled by the Chinese leader in terms of who talks to, who he doesn't. But hang on, I lost my thought. The point I'm trying to make is that that's not something that leaders are going to do in order to not offend Beijing. All right. But I remember where I was going with this. But the United States does have a special kind of relationship with Taiwan, in that even though we don't really recognize them as a sovereign state, we support them a lot. We've sold them weapons and things like this. We're kind of their biggest ally. We've also kind of defended them to the Chinese, and we're like, respect their autonomy or their ability to kind of govern themselves, even if you think that they are China. And here's the thing: is that the people of Taiwan and the people of China literally agree to disagree on the idea of who is actually like legitimate China. And so they do business with each other and all this. But the fact of the matter is that China, the People's Republic, that is, has kind of always kind of held over them that at any point, whenever we want to, we can take this land and make you whatever we want you to be. And so the Taiwanese do not want to go to war against China. They can't win that unless the United States would get involved, or who knows? I don't really think that we would, but I also think that we would try to pressure China not to impose on the Taiwanese. So it really is kind of a really messy, unclear kind of situation that I wanted to talk to you about, because it factors into our discussion of what sovereignty actually is. Here's an example of what I'm talking about. The United States, this happened. I don't have the date on this article. We're talking like in the last week or so. U.S. sails warship through Taiwan Strait amid tensions with China. Now, the Taiwan Strait is going to be this. Okay. We're looking geographically at the area around the South China Sea. I hope to spend more time looking at this in future videos, but the Chinese have claimed the entire South China Sea region, regardless of international law, regardless of other countries that have also laid claim. China says it's ours because we have a historical a legacy of having controlled and having influence over that area. And so they claim it straight up. And Taiwan is part of that. Taiwan also has counterclaims saying they own part of the South China Sea. Actually, they weirdly agree with China on that. It's just that instead of the People's Republic of China controlling it, they think that they control it because they think they're China. The point is that this here just happened. The Chinese military is will resolutely perform its defense duties and continue to take all necessary measures to safeguard our sovereignty and the regional peace and stability. They saw this somewhat as a threat by the United States in that area, and we're pretty pushy in that regard. By the way, these two ships came within 45, 45 yards of one another. It came so close to crashing in the Strait of Taiwan. It's unbelievable. You should go back and Google that and look at it. So another way, we know what sovereignty is. A state has the ability to govern themselves without question. At least that's what the definition of sovereignty is, but that doesn't always happen. Stronger countries like the United States, you could argue, have more sovereignty than other countries. You could argue that Russia has more sovereignty than other countries that maybe have no ability to govern themselves. And so another example might be Syria. They're having a civil war, but they have no power in and of themselves over how that ends up, which is the reason why the United States and Russia and Saudi Arabia and Iran and all these different power players are involved in the Syrian civil wars, because they don't have the power to control what's within their boundaries in the same way that we would. Nobody interfered in our civil war, right? Autonomy is another way of looking at power, but it's really kind of a different thing altogether. It's not really power as much as simply the ability for an area within a state to govern itself without a whole lot of interference. So, to read the definition, self-governing regions that belong to a state but can kind of do their own thing. All right, this is really, really important. All right, let me give you an example. If you look at, I think it might be my next. I'll get ahead of myself a little bit. Let's look at the United Kingdom. The United Kingdom is a country. They're a state, but they describe themselves as a country of countries. Now, wait a second. We know what that's like, right? Because we are the United States of America. We have a bunch of states within our state, which is the U.S. It's actually not really like that. And it's hard for me to say it because it's hard for me to conceptualize their identities with their individual nations. But England, Wales, Scotland, and Northern Ireland each are different nations within the political unit known as the United Kingdom. So they all kind of fall within the government of the United Kingdom, but they control themselves because they're autonomous regions with their own parliaments. They can tax their own people. They can make regional laws and things that apply to their people and govern them kind of at a more local level than the British, the United Kingdom government as a whole. But they still fall within the jurisdiction or within the authority of the central government. So this here is what I mean by autonomous regions. These are, you can consider each of these to be kind of autonomous in that they do their own thing or they govern themselves, but it's still part of a country. Probably even these here are probably better examples of I guess they're all examples of an autonomous region. I guess they all would be different in the way they look and appear. All right, the people in the United Kingdom, it doesn't really get super nasty there in terms of political unrest, but we already talked about how in Kosovo it did, right? The Kurds in Iraq, they don't have their own state, and they want it. And so you have a problem here where sometimes they feel mistreated. But for the most part, these are all areas that are controlled by other states that really kind of enjoy a level of autonomy, not independence, but it's like independence because the main government doesn't really interfere much in what they do as long as they're not doing crazy stuff. Who would have known? Do you guys know that Greenland was part of Denmark? You might actually in your lifetime see Greenland become its own country and be free of Denmark. You might also see Scotland sooner than later become its own thing. You know that most people in Scotland were okay with staying in the European Union. The Brexit vote might cause them to want yet another referendum to become their own country. I think the last one that happened was actually in 2015. Not that long ago, they voted by a very slim margin to stay part of the United Kingdom. Everybody thought they were going to separate and become their own country. Hong Kong, just like with Taiwan, is considered part of China. China makes it very known that they can do whatever they want to in Hong Kong, but Hong Kong it's not a micro-state because it is technically part of sovereign China, but it is definitely an autonomous region, and they have their own government, their own president, and their own economy. They do their own thing. It's just that China, again, just like with Taiwan, continually makes it known that they are part of China. Let's see. The United Kingdom. I just said all this. It's comprised of 4 different nations consider themselves separate countries. They, by the way, they also play soccer as different teams, okay, or football as the world knows it. They do not play as the United Kingdom. They play as different countries represented by Scotland, Wales, England, Northern Ireland. Also know that even though this is all the geographic island of Ireland, the Republic of Ireland is its own separate country. It is not part of the United Kingdom. All right. It is not part of the United Kingdom. So, if states and countries are the same, what the heck is a nation? What is that? A large aggregate of people united by common descent, history, culture, or language, inhabiting a particular country or territory. Now, wait a second. One, that's a pretty good definition. And number 2, that's way different, actually, than what we define as a state. So, as synonyms, it literally says that countries and states are synonymous with nation. And the reason for that, ladies and gentlemen, is because we use those words synonymously. So, if you're watching the news and everyone talks about nations and states, and you have to look at context to realize they're saying the exact same thing, they're just using different words, it's important for the sake of discourse to know that when you're asked about nations and states, a state is going to be the territory, the people, and the government, the sovereignty. A nation is going to be a group of people with a common descent, history, culture, language. You could throw maybe race. You could throw maybe a struggle. You could throw values and beliefs in there as well. All of these things make up a nation of people. It's almost kind of like an ethnicity in a way. A nation is not the same as a state, despite how you will hear it used interchangeably on the news. A nation, here's this definition comes out of the AP Human Geography AMSCO book. A group of people who share common heritage, and I paraphrase it. So it comes out of that, but it's also, I'll paraphrase it. They share common values, beliefs, are bound to a geographic region because of history and tradition and a desire to govern themselves. Now, that desire to govern themselves is also a really important part of it. And that, again, this here is our definition of a state. So the French, are we looking at a nation? Well, we already established the French or France as a state, right? But they all speak French for the most part, all right? They're all ethnically the same for the most part. They all have a Catholic heritage. They all share a similar history, okay? They're all, despite what you might see in the news, for the most part, politically united in that they agree on the same basic way that the government and constitution and all that's going to work. The people of France are a nation, y'all. They're a nation and they're a state, all right? So what we're looking at here, and they have all those things, what we're looking at here is a bona fide nation state. Now, I would write this down. So a nation state is what happens when the two concepts come together as one. You have a group of people bound by history, language, culture, beliefs, and values, whatever that might be, as well as their own territory and as well as their own government with sovereignty. All right, so the word we use to describe a nation state is homogeneous or homogeneity. All right, in other words, everyone there is pretty much going to be nationally the same. Now, I'm not saying that 100% of everyone in France is going to be a French-speaking French guy with French history that's Catholic. That's just not true. But the majority of them are, okay? other great examples of bona fide nation states is Korea, Japan, France, Italy, Iceland. This is just a few. I mean, I tried my best. I have a map somewhere that shows just kind of like a sprinkling of different nation states across the earth. I tried so hard to find it, and I could not find it in any of my stuff. I don't know what I've done with it. But especially Korea, especially Japan, especially Italy and Iceland, these places are almost entirely nationally homogeneous. Okay, especially Korea and Japan. There just aren't going to be very many people that are not Korean in Korea, and there are not Japanese in Japan. You might also see sometimes where you would consider other European countries like the United Kingdom or not the United Kingdom, like Germany maybe, to be a nation state. There are some that you would not. Like, for example, Belgium is not a nation state because there are two different nations living within Belgium. Belgium's pretty small, but you've got the Flemish and you got the Walloons, who are completely different people on a national level. We already talked about how the United Kingdom is not going to be a nation state because you've got the United Kingdom is comprised of 4 different nations of people that don't identify nationally as one and the same. More on that in a second. You also have stateless nations. Now, this right here goes back to the definition of what a nation is, where we talked about how they want to, let me find it real quick. They want to govern themselves, okay? So if you look at a place like the Kurds or Kurdistan, geez, I don't even have a map. How terrible. If you look at the Middle East, around Syria, really from eastern Turkey all the way up to northern Iraq, you've got this whole group of people called the Kurds that live in that geographic area, but they don't have their own state. And they want their own state, but they have to share their borders with all these other countries that have sovereignty. And so this is an example of a stateless nation. The Palestinians, right, are example of a stateless nation living with people in Israel, and you still see that in the news a lot as well. These guys do have UN representation though, but they're not seen as a sovereign state. The Basque, we talked about the people living in kind of in that area right between Spain and France, kind of in northern Spain and southwestern France. They are the only remaining people from the pre-Indo-European age. They speak a completely non-Indo-European language. And so they're also going to be an autonomous region, but they're a stateless nation. They actually share, part of them live in Spain, part of them live in France. Quebec in Canada. These guys are French speaking. They are not nationally the same as everyone else. There's English speaking. You also have the Nunavut people living in Canada. There's another nation. So, and other Native American groups consider themselves to be nations. And by definition that I just provided earlier in the PowerPoint, yeah, they are. Which brings me to the definition of a multinational state, okay? A multinational state is going to be a state that has multiple nations living within. So we've already hit on a few of these: Canada, the United Kingdom. I've heard, and people have talked about the United States as a multinational state as well as a nation state. Just for a second, if we think about the United States as a nation state, what would it be that would bind us together as a nation of people? Because we are very, very ethnically diverse and have a lot of people from all over the world that kind of mix into our historical legacy into what we are today. That's why we call ourselves a melting pot. Can we possibly be a nation? Well, one thing that even though you might think differently when you watch the news, the vast majority of people in our country feel in line and united around the idea of the freedoms protected by the Constitution. Okay, freedom of speech, the freedom of expression, freedom of religion. One thing that we, for the most part, really value is the idea that you can believe whatever the heck you want to believe, but you're not going to cause me to have to believe that too, because we just inherently agree on that very concept. So that there is one way we could definitely see ourselves as a nation, as we have that much in common. So you can argue it either way, Russia is extremely multinational. China has multiple nations. We already talked about the people of Taiwan, the people of Hong Kong, but we also have people that are completely different, like the people of Tibet, which are Buddhist, and also are their own thing. Here is an example of Russia and all the ethnic groups. Now, this is ethnic groups. A lot of these groups that kind of live along the mainly the southern border and the eastern border of Russia, they consider themselves to be nationally different from the Russians. Okay, and so this here is an incredibly multinational state. A multi-state nation then is going to be when a nation makes up more than one state. And the best example of this that I could find is Korea. Okay, and I have a map that I apparently put at the beginning of the slides and meant to put back down here at the end. Actually, here, hang on a sec. I'll go back and look at it real quick. Give me just a second. There it is. So your Korean Peninsula, the geographic Korean Peninsula, is comprised of the North Koreans or North Korea and South Korea, right? And they're all Korean. They're just as Korean as the next Korean, okay? Every single one of them. They speak the same language. They come from the same history. They share all this same stuff. But ever since the communist takeover of the North under Kim Il-sung, the North has politically gone in this direction, and the South has politically gone in this direction. And so they're completely different political units, but they're all nationally Korean. That is a multi-state nation because the nation exists within multiple states. All right, so I'll go back down here to the bottom. Sorry about that. Turn my captions on, turn my pointer back on. Okay, so and we're almost there. Actually, really, that's the majority of what I had to talk about today. We're a little bit. Oh, I finished up before 50 minutes. That's different. But here's some of the things we talked about. We spent a lot of time looking at sovereignty, and I think that's so important to understanding why a state is understanding what sovereignty is and how that plays into the definition of a state. At the beginning of the presentation, I showed you a news hour, or I showed you the YouTube news, PBS NewsHour news, or daily evening news is what I'm trying to say. They do a very good job, just kind of recap that real quick, at showing political geography as well as other things and how they relate in the world pertain to human geography. If you get a chance to watch even say 20 minutes of it, whenever I was in my classroom last year, I showed my study hall news hour. You know, we watched it every single day. They usually have the top headlines first, and then they have like a cultural unit kind of, you know, within the video. It's really, really cool for the course. If you get a chance to watch that, political geography would be would be a great time within the course to do that. I highly encourage it. But is there any other questions y'all might have for me before I go ahead and sign off tonight? I appreciate you guys being here with me. Don't forget that next week we're going to be doing a Kahoot. It's totally free. So if you have any classmates that want to get in on that, tell them to go, find the link, which should be on the website, and be a part of that. And also get them to join this if you feel like it's helpful for you. Tell them about me, and I will see you guys next week. And then after that, have a Merry Christmas, and then we'll come back in January. Peace out.